Welcome to the Redbird Report, your destination for the latest on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here are your hosts, BK and T-Bone.
He's T-Bone. I'm BK. You've got the Redbird Report. Happy to have you back. We're basically weekly at this point, T-Bone. I mean, Cardinal season is here, and that's because there's news to pass along. Last time that we spoke with you guys, we had mentioned, hey, do the Cardinals have a legitimate extension candidate at spring training? This used to be an annual thing, and then it just kind of went away, and it disappeared from the ether. But this year, there was an extension candidate at spring training. His name is Ollie Marmol, not a player, but the manager nonetheless. He has signed a 2-year contract extension with a club option for a 3rd year beyond 2026. Neither of us were overly surprised by this, T-Bone. We thought that this could be in play all offseason. The question was more of like a, why hasn't this happened? As opposed to a, should this happen? So what was your reaction when it finally did happen? And now Ollie Marmol is locked in for, at least under contract, for the next 3 years.
Yeah, I think it's smart for Chaim Bloom to get this contract extension done with Ollie Marmol. And I get it. Some of the fan base doesn't like him. And I think part of that falls into 2 different categories as to why. One, viewed him as a puppet to John Mozeliak after the weird hush-hush firing of Mike Schilt. And then the second one is he just happens to be the guy in like one of the more important seats in St. Louis sports when the Cardinals started their fall from grace. And they fell from a team that was in the playoffs in 22 to a team that lost 91 games and has missed the playoffs for 3 straight seasons. But I think it's smart. Like, I think when you watched what Ollie Marmol did in 2022 and how he was able to manage that clubhouse with veterans and guys that were older than him, than like Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina and Adam Wainwright towards the back end of their career, and how he was able to mix and match matchups back in 2022, I think that showed you he can really handle a roster when it gets to a time when the Cardinals are ready to win again. And then I look back on, I get it, 2023 happened. He'll say it publicly, they sucked that year. Pitching caved in on itself. But then I look at 2024 and 2025, and those teams had no business being as competitive as they ended up being. That 24 team ended up being above 500. Last year, they were in the playoff race basically up until about the deadline, and then even post-deadline. They were technically in it till about September started. I think he's done a great job of maximizing the roster that they've had on the field, and then I think he's done a great job of keeping that clubhouse together, where even in tough times like 2023, like 2025, were this past season, I've not once seen a report come out that has said, hey, the clubhouse has been lost, players are taking naps during meetings, like we saw happen at the end of TLR's time in Chicago, like you saw in San Francisco at the end of the Bob Melvin era there, where there was all kinds of issues, same with San Diego. That hasn't happened. That means he's got the respect of that clubhouse. He's keeping that group together. And I'll say this, they play hard for Ollie Marmol. They were playing hard in September when they were out of it last year. All that being said, I think it makes sense. And add on top of that, he's had the background of what it was like in the development system down in the minor leagues when the Cardinals were still churning out decent talent at that time. So he knows the evers of what it requires to develop good Major League Baseball players, and I think he can bring that to the Major League level for a team that is going to be rebuilding.
Yeah, Ollie Marmol said at his press conference when they announced that he was going to get this extension, he thinks he was born to be in this position at this time for this franchise. That may be a little bit overstated, but I do think he is the right guy for the job today. And the reason being, there's a lot of it, but one is what you said about him being in development previously. 2, I think he has shown a real ability to hire the right staff below him. I think he's done a really good job of setting aside his ego. He tried to hire Yadier Molina as his bench coach. Yadi decided he wasn't ready for that opportunity at that time, but he tried, and that would have been quite the leap of faith by Ollie Marmol to do that.
Too, by the way, with Matt Holliday, a guy that wanted to be a
Matt Holliday
manager as well.
And did it previously with Skip Schumacher, who at the time was a bigger name here in St. Louis than Ollie Marmol was. So you're seeing, all right, there's a clear system here in place where this guy wants the best people around him. I would also say this, he's loyal, but not to a fault. And I think there were a lot of people that were ready to move on from the hitting coach a little before they did, but ultimately they made the move that was necessary. This was something that Mike Matheny, back in his time with the Cardinals, he was loyal to a fault. He had his guys that were on his staff, and you were not going to change that, even if it was necessary. And sometimes you just need new voices in the room, right? So them going to Brant Brown, them bringing in Dusty Blake, a younger group of voices that can help support these young players, I think that's really important. I think that's valuable. The other thing is, Ollie's been pushing them at the major league level to do things a little bit differently. He's talked about what they've done defensively and how they've been able to improve on that side of the ball. He's talked about the need to improve their stuff from the pitching staff for years. Now we're finally starting to see that. More on that in a moment. And he's also somebody that's talked about the staffing, not just at the major league level, but at the minor league level. You get him on or off record, he'll talk about that stuff with you, about how, hey, it's really important to have the quantity of coaches that are necessary to develop these players. The Cardinals weren't doing that previously. Now you have Chaim Bloom in place, who is willing to do that and has put the resources in place to be able to do that. I just think it's a very good match for where the Cardinals are at right now. Will he actually be their manager in 3 years if they're good again? I truly have no idea. I would personally bet yes, but I could understand the argument that Cardinals fans could make where they say, hey, this is the same situation the Cubs were in a number of years ago, where they hire Renteria, he's their manager, Joe Maddon becomes available, they're ready to win, they go make the hire of the big manager that we've seen win at a really high level. But regardless of what happens 3 years from now, I think it was the right move. I think he's the right guy for the job. And I think they were smart to get this done right now. I mentioned the stuff from the rotation, especially because they've had pretty good stuff out of the bullpen for a few years now, but the rotation's been lagging behind.
Yeah.
T-Bone, we were just watching the Cardinals game earlier today. We're recording this on Thursday, March the 5th, a little after they finished that game against the Pirates. Dustin May started that game. He looked awesome. He was throwing 99. The velo was absolutely ridiculous. Touched 99 through 16 fastballs of at least 97 miles per hour. He then was relieved by Quinn Matthews, who came in and looked the part of what he was 2 years ago. 18 of his pitches were at 95 miles an hour or above. This comes from Derek Gould. The Cardinals' average velo from their rotation on four-seam fastballs in 2024 was 92.9 miles per hour. No surprise, that was the fifth lowest in all of Major League Baseball. They had a slight uptick last year, T-Bone, all the way up to 93.5 miles per hour.
That might have been just Wainwright coming off the staff.
Fair. That was good for the eighth lowest average fastball velocity in all of Major League Baseball. This is just a team that hasn't valued that. They haven't gone after big fastball guys, and they haven't gone after the big stuff guys. They sink it, they get it on the ground, they get outs. That's always been their philosophy. What do you make of this change that we are clearly seeing at the major league level? Libby was throwing 97. Richard Fitz is throwing 98. May throwing 99. Quinn Matthews consistently hovering above 95. What do you make of the rotation and the velo that we're seeing from these guys right now?
I love what I'm seeing from these guys because it's no coincidence that the harder you throw, the harder it is to hit a baseball. And I love the fact that they're finally catching up to modern times and starting to add this to the rotation. Yeah, don't get me wrong. The bullpen, to your point, they had guys that could really throw it. I mean, Helsley was throwing like 102 miles an hour out of the bullpen when they had him. When they had Hicks a couple of years ago, he could throw like 105. But they never had anybody like this in the rotation. And you think about some of the best arms in baseball now, and I'm not saying they've got this in this rotation, but think about some of the best arms in the sport. Wheeler throws in the upper 90s. Skubal throws in the upper 90s. DeGrom throws like 100 by the time he gets to the sixth inning. All the best guys in baseball, Paul Skeens, another one of them, are all throwing in the upper 90s as starters now. This is no longer like it was back in like 2015 when it was like the one reliever would come out of the bullpen. It's like, wow, that Trevor Rosenthal guy throws 100. No, everybody is getting to that point. So I like the fact that they're finally getting to that, and they targeted guys that had big fastballs. Dustin May had that when he was healthy back in 2024 before he had surgery and before
23.
he had 23, before he had surgery and the esophagus tear when he lost a bunch of weight. Fitz was clearly a guy that they targeted that Chaim Bloom had seen in the Red Sox system where he said, That guy's got a big fastball. We don't know if we can develop the other stuff, but as long as we have that one pitch that we can first lean on, we can develop the rest of the arsenal around it. And then Quinn Mathews. It's no coincidence Quinn Mathews had struggles last year because his velo dipped. I love what we're seeing from what they've got with this guys. This is what they have desperately been missing in this rotation. I don't think that this is going to be some like top 15 rotation, but it's at least interesting with the arms that they've got and the stuff that we're seeing in spring training.
Saw this today. Dustin May threw a curveball today, something he has not done in a game since 2019. He also touched 99 miles per hour 3 separate times. He hasn't done that since May of 2023. We both loved the Dustin May acquisition in the offseason because it's one of those where, what else are you going to do? We said all offseason, get somebody like a Dustin May, whether it's him or somebody else, go out there and get somebody with upside. It's a bounce back candidate, and maybe you can get something out of them. And if not, well, if it fails, you DFA him in 3 months. You spent the money, whatever, it's a sunk cost. And now Quinn Mathews is making his way to the big leagues and he's able to replace him in your rotation. So worst case scenario, it was just a loss. Best case scenario, though, looks like this. Like, this is what you would hope for if you were a Cardinals fan going into spring training and you were saying, what would it look like if Dustin May was quote unquote back? This is what it looks like. Now, can he sustain this? Can he do this for 6 months? Can he be a guy that it's not just 99 when he's throwing 3 innings, but as he's getting 5, 6 plus innings into a game, can he continue to maintain that velo? That's been the issue for some of the other Cardinals pitchers in the past, looking at you, Matthew Liberatore. So it can't just be a really nice spring training outing in early March. It's got to be this in early May and then in early June and then in early July as well. We'll see if he's able to maintain that. But these are stepping stones. And the first box that he had to check was looking the part in spring training. Check that box, baby. It's done. He did that today. I'm thrilled by what they're getting out of him. And he's the kind of player that either can get you an absolute haul at the deadline if he becomes this again, or I know people haven't had a whole lot of conversations about this previously because there is some risk involved with his kind of a profile. Man, Dustin May could just be a part of the core. Dustin May is what, 26 years old?
28, yeah.
28 years old? You could sign him to a 3 or a 4 year deal. You add him to the core and then either trade him later on, or, man, this guy becomes a quote unquote veteran presence for your rotation for the next few years. And he stabilizes things in the middle while some of those other players continue to make their way through your minor league system. At a minimum, he's a guy you could at least put the qualifying offer on next offseason. $20 million for this? Yeah. Hell yeah. Do that 10 times out of 10.
And if he doesn't take it, guess what? You get a draft pick when he signs elsewhere.
Great.
Which sounds fantastic for Chaim Bloom. With him especially, because you mentioned like 2023 was the last time that he was able to get up there with his fastball. When he's had the body weight and the arm to play with him and the arm's not been barking or anything like that, I went back and looked from when he was with the Dodgers from 2019 to 2023. Of course, that's when he gets injured in 2023, misses 2024. 2025 has the bad year with a 4.96 ERA between the Dodgers and Red Sox. He made 34 starts from 2019 to 2023, 46 total appearances, and had a 3.1 ERA. And in that time frame, by the way, 8.2 strikeouts per 9. You can play with that. And that's a guy that if he's healthy and he has his fastball, I'm not saying you can lock in a 3.1 ERA. That would be impressive, and that would get you a haul at the trade deadline. But that does show you, like, when he is right, he can be an effective pitcher. And maybe he doesn't settle in at 3.1, but can he settle in at like 3.5, 3.7 ERA for the Cardinals this season and then really bring a tough conversation for them when we get to the trade deadline of, do we keep this guy as a part of the core? Do we cash in our asset right now and maybe get some prospects in return? So the fact that you're starting to see this through the first outing, and this isn't, let me rephrase, I guess I wouldn't even say even technically his first outing. It is his first spring outing. There was reports of this on the backfields early on in spring as well. It is very encouraging to see this coming from Dustin May because this is exactly what they needed to target on a 1-year type contract that they could potentially either cash their chips in at the deadline for or to add to their core moving forward.
So May's interesting. We know that he's a guy we liked at the time that they have added to the rotation, and he's going to be a part of your rotation going into the thing. Like, he's 100% locked in. He's one of the 5. I would say Matthew Liberatore is locked in. I think Michael McGreevy is locked in. That's 3. The question then becomes who else is in that rotation and how many are in that rotation. Do they go with the thing that they did last year, where Steven Matz is not technically a starter, but he is a piggyback option. He can go multiple innings for you out of the bullpen, and then he starts. I think it was like 2 or 3 games in the first month. It wasn't an every 5th or 6th day situation, though. Or do they just say, you know what? We're going with the 6-man. We trust our bullpen. We think we have the necessary arms that we can just churn through that thing. We can make it work with only 7 relievers instead of the typical 8 that we're able to use. We're going 6-man rotation, and we're going to make that work for the first month of the season or so. That does have a trickle-down effect on how you decide to go about your roster. T-Bone, for you, what do you think they should do? 5-man hybrid versus the 6. And what do you think that means for the arms that are competing for those final 2 or 3 spots?
Yeah, I would lean probably to what they did last year, which was the 5 hybrid role. And the way that I would construct that then, I agree with what you said of the first 3 of locks, but McGreevy, Libby, and May, those are locks for the rotation. And then it comes down to, okay, so if we're going 5 in a hybrid, that means one of Fitz, Leahy, or Palante are kind of the odd man out and probably has some mold into that bullpen role / hybrid role that Matt's was in. I got to say, I really hope that they stick with Fitz in the rotation and Leahy in the rotation, because I just want to see what those guys have, and I think they can bring a little bit bigger stuff than what Palante can. And Palante can then slide into that bullpen, kind of serve as the long reliever / the guy that can come in and start in a pinch in the sixth starter role, and then honestly could also serve as a little bit of a left-handed specialist, even though he's right-handed because he gets lefties out when he's well. I just see a little bit more upside to Fitz and Leahy, to where if you go with that 5 and hybrid, I want them to start those guys. I hope they don't decide to put Fitz into that hybrid role, because I saw he came out of the bullpen the other day in a spring training game. I wouldn't read too much into that because they're starting to get into an innings crunch, especially now that May is starting to make starts in spring training games. But I saw that and went, boy, I hope they don't fall victim to putting him to this hybrid role, because his stuff would play up throwing 99 miles an hour, 97 miles an hour out of your bullpen. But that's exactly why I want to see him in the rotation. I want to see him and what he looks like every 5th day, along with Kyle Leahy. I already know he can pitch out of the bullpen. I want to know, can he actually pitch as a starter, maintain velocity, and still get guys out and still have decent swing and miss when he gets into that 5th or 6th inning of work? So I would go 5 in hybrid, and then I would just kind of push Palante already a little bit to the side and make him that 6th starter. You've already seen what he is as a starter, and he's not going to strike out guys. We already know that. I don't think you can add that to his profile. I think you use him as the long reliever / 6th starter here.
I'd go 6. I'd go with the 6-man rotation to start things out. I think it keeps guys healthier. You give them that extra day of rest. Some of these guys, like Kyle Leahy's going to run into an innings situation at some point this year, you would think. The same thing may be true for Dustin May. I hope not, but you never know. We'll see what happens with like a Quinn Mathews later on. Richard Fitz, same thing. Go ahead and limit those innings early on. This can buy you a start or 2 at the end of the regular season. We remember what happened a year ago with some of these guys that you were trying to transition into your rotation. So I would just go 6 from day one. The other thing this does, it allows you to evaluate these guys in the same situation. So you get into May, when you start out, like really when you're going to get into that 5-man rotation potentially, you get into May and you've been able to see all of these guys in their normal routine. You're not trying to evaluate Richard Fitz as a starter versus Andre Palante coming out of the pen, because that can be a very different situation where you're thinking about 2 innings and maybe he shows out in that scenario and Richard Fitz runs into some struggles as a starter. It's entirely realistic that that would be the scenario that you see play out. But when you put Palante into the rotation and maybe you flip their roles going into early May, maybe Palante struggles and you see Fitz really succeed in the bullpen. And so what did you really accomplish by doing that? Let's see all of them in a rotation capacity, getting the normal routine beforehand, and then going out there throwing 5+ innings and giving yourself a chance to really evaluate this. That's what this season's all about. It's about evaluation. The other thing about it, and I mentioned it previously, I just think they have the bullpen to make this work. I think they have a lot of guys that can go multiple innings if need be. and you have the necessary flexibility within that pin to where you can bring guys up and send guys down every single week if you really need to get those fresh arms into the mix, because you will put more pressure as a 6-man rotation on the bullpen than you would if you were going to the 5 plus the hybrid.
Yeah, and I don't mind that. I guess where I just come from is I don't know that I need to see Palante as much, right? I've seen it. I think you kind of know what his ceiling is, even though last year was much worse than what it was 2 years ago when he went down the minors, built himself back up, and then came back to the rotation. I just don't have I don't necessarily feel the need to see him, but I won't be opposed to if they do it. And like you said, they've got the arms down in the minor leagues and a little bit of that flexibility in theory to be able to run through the bullpen if they want. So I'm okay with it. But the other thing that I would say that as of right now, maybe this is wishful thinking because we know how arms hold up across a Major League Baseball season. I'm not as worried about them running into that innings problem this year because I actually think they've got some support down there in the minor leagues this time around. Like watching Quinn Mathews today, that guy looks like he might be ready this year if he can stay healthy and maintain that velo. Like I think there's a chance if he's not already knocking on the door to potentially take a role on this team come opening day, he's going to be knocking on that door by the end of April. So you've already got somebody else that can come in and support you there. Bryson Mottz has looked pretty good to where there was a conversation about like, hey, we may consider using him and developing him out of the bullpen for this year before we move him back into developing as a starter at the big leagues. Well, that's 2 names that I just mentioned, and that's before even Liam Doyle's name has been brought into the mix. Sainge's name's been brought into the mix. They've got some arms down there now to where they, in theory, that's why I said maybe I'm getting a little out over my skis, in theory, shouldn't run into too much of an innings problem this year. Last year, yeah, they did, and they were really screwed. Like, if you put the Cardinals on truth serum, I think they would have loved to have really taken innings off of the load of Matthew Liberatore at the end of the year. They just couldn't do it because they truly had nobody else that can move into a starter's role.
So you mentioned Bryson Mottz, the conversation about him potentially being one of those lefties in the bullpen. We saw what Quinn Mathews looked like in a short burst today, going 3 innings. That looked fun. What was it? 12 swing and misses?
Yeah, 7 strikeouts, and then he had 12 swing and misses against, by the way, some of the Pirates regulars.
That's the thing. When you see some of these stats, they can be very misleading. You might be watching a bunch of guys that are coming from the backfields, and you get later into the game. Yeah, we're never going to see them at the big league level. They're worse than the competition Quinn Mathews would see at AAA this year, for example. That wasn't necessarily the case today. He was good against high-level competition. I know you've talked about this in the past. The Cardinals have made reference to it. This is the way they used to operate, by developing pitchers out of the bullpen. Hell, we don't have to look that far in previous history to see it. They did it with Matthew Liberatore 2 years ago, where he was out of the bullpen, and last year became a legit starter option for them. Last year, Kyle Leahy was a bullpen arm for them. This year, he appears to be a legitimate starter for them. So it wouldn't just be hot air like it has been in the past with Ryan Helsley, Jordan Hicks at times, where they say maybe eventually they could go back to being a starter, but it never really happens while they're in St. Louis. Would you consider that with Mathews or Bryson Mottz this year? Would you be willing to put them into the pen in that capacity with the understanding that this is a 1-year thing, and either they'll transition back to being a starter this year at the big league level, or probably more likely, they're in this role for this year, see how your stuff plays at the major league level, and then next year we see what they look like as a starter again?
Yeah, I don't think I would. Though I find them very intriguing, and watching Mathews today really made me get excited about him. I still think I would have them down in the minor leagues continuing to develop as starters and truly sticking to the, hey, you're going to start once a week down there in the minor leagues and continue to build on that that routine and how they go through that process. And I think part of my thinking there is I think there's going to be innings potentially at some point this year in this rotation. We talked about this, I can't remember if it was on the last Redbird report or on our show. This is not just a competition that is going to just, all right, spring training is over. Boom, we've got our 6 starters. We can talk to Quinn Mathews maybe after the trade deadline if we move Dustin May. No, this is going to be a competition from now, when spring training started, till the time we get to the end of the season. There's that much pressure on guys to continue to perform because there are guys that are coming through the system. So I think there are still innings there to where I would like to continue to have him working on his routine as a starter, starting every 7th day down in the minor leagues down there, And then we can have this conversation as we get into the season of, okay, maybe everybody is staying healthy. Everybody is performing. Mathews is clearly ready. Now do we consider taking him into the bullpen role and developing him there? But for now, I want to see him start the season as a guy that's still developing as a starter down in the minor leagues, because I think they've got plenty of bullpen options that they don't necessarily need him.
I wouldn't do it with Mottz or Quinn Mathews. I would be more open to it for this year with a guy like Tink Hence. Now, I just don't know that his stuff is going to play enough to even transition to the major league level, whether it's as a starter or a reliever right now, hopefully in the future. But he's somebody that I would be more willing to consider because of the lack of options that's available to him and just the number of injuries he's run into. He might be more of a short burst pitcher right now. Other guys that I would consider that with, not right now because of where they're at with their injuries, but TK Roby, he's going to run out of options sooner rather than later. He's only got 2 left. And then Cooper Jerpy is a guy who's 25 years old, previous first-round pick from 2022. Eventually, you're going to want to get a return on the investment from those guys. If that has to come out of the bullpen first for them to continue to develop at the major league level, I'm cool with that. But that's more of like almost a rehab plan than it is we're getting your feet wet at the major league level to then transition as a starter, right? So I think those guys, Tink, TK Roby, Cooper Jerpy, I'm more open to it with them than I would be right now with Bryson Mottz or Quinn Mathews. Quinn Mathews, I just want to be a starter. This guy, the value of him is that he can eat the innings. I think he probably projects more as like a mid to back end of the rotation starter.
Agreed.
Let's see what it looks like. Just keep developing in that role. The best way you can improve is by doing it. So continue to do it at whether it's the minor or major league level. I also think he's up there with like your 6th or 7th best option right now. You're probably going to see Quinn Mathews anyways at some point this season. Yeah. He could very well find himself in the Michael McGreevy role sooner rather than later. I could say the same thing for Bryson Mottz or Richard Fitz or Hunter Dobbins when he gets back from injury. So they haven't had this luxury in a while. The Cardinals finally actually have some depth to their rotation at the AAA level. Just keep it there. Keep developing these guys. Let's see what it looks like over time. And they've got a bunch of arms to use in the bullpen, so I don't feel the need to rush any of them to the major league level.
And the other thing that I like about it, and it wouldn't play so much like for this season, it would be more of for the 2027 conversation when we get there. But if you have these guys continuing to develop as starters, you don't run into that innings limit, which we were just talking about, like with Kyle Leahy as he comes out of the bullpen. The problem they had with Matthew Liberatore. Last year, his innings were just at 99 because of injuries to start the year where he had that, I think it was back problem, if I remember correctly. You look back to 2024 when he just shot through the minor league system. He covered 143 1/3 innings that season. So just like McGreevy, who was another guy that was an innings eater for the Cardinals. That way, when he does get up to the rotation and is truly a full-time starter at the big leagues, rather than having this innings limit of, boy, once we get to 120, we don't really know what we're going to be doing. Or is he going to be able to keep going? Is he going to run into a wall? No, man, he's developed and is ready to go and should be a guy that can throw at minimum 150. McGreevy came up. I think it's possible this year he could go anywhere between 180 to 200. That's how ready he was based on the way that he was able to develop and continue learning as a starting pitcher.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got the Redbird Report coming up next. How much changes about your early season expectations for the lineup if Ivan Herrera is only playing behind the plate a couple of times a week? We'll talk about that next here on the Redbird Report. So Ivan Herrera was almost inarguably the Cardinals' best hitter last year. The guy was unbelievable. And the thought was going into the season, he's going to get a real opportunity behind the plate. But he had the offseason surgery on his elbow to remove some of those loose bodies. He says that was hindering him from being able to throw to second the way that he wanted to. Hey, man, if that's the thing, cool. Let's get this taken care of. So they get that surgery, and now he's on a very slow and deliberate plan to get him ready to go for the season. Seems to be fine at the plate. It's the throwing program that's a little bit behind right now. That's fine. I'm not worried about that on March the 5th. However, we talked to Derek Gould, Cardinals insider for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch earlier this week, and he said it's his understanding they might be taking this a little slow with Ivan Herrera. He might be more of a every few days, maybe a couple of days a week behind the plate in the early portion of the season, as opposed to 2 out of 3 in every series, the guy that's behind the plate, and maybe Pedro Paez is getting the bulk of that work as the catcher Again, early on in the season, we'll see how things develop from there. T-Bone, in your mind, how much of the early season, not necessarily roster construction-wise, but lineup-wise, how much changes if that's the plan and you see maybe it's 4 out of 6 as a DH for Ivan Herrera in the early going?
Yeah, I'm honestly not sure how much it changes for the Cardinals. I mean, it locks in that you're going to see Pages and maybe Pozo get another start behind the plate, which, by the way, congrats, Pozo. You're definitely making the opening day roster now as both the backup catcher and the backup first baseman. The one guy that I would say it potentially puts pressure on, but I'm not even sure how much I can convince myself of it putting pressure on him, would be Gorman's spot at third base. And the reason I say that is if they did look at it, and he made a bad play today at third on a short arm throw that poor Mautz Mathews then gave up instead of a solo shot, a 2-run homer. But I thought maybe there was a chance they could look at that and go, okay, if Gorman's defense isn't good enough at third, we can at least DH him. And we can start Urias at third base, and he's a Gold Glove caliber defender, so he can stick to kind of our identity as a team, which is, hey, we want to be good defensively around our pitchers. With this news, if this is what they decide to do is slow play Herrera, well, Herrera locks in that DH spot, and Gorman's a guy that I think they want answers on. So now the only place you can play him is third base. And I can't see a scenario, especially in a rebuild in a year in which they know it's going to be rough with the results, that they ultimately look at it and say, yeah, we're going to play Urias over Gorman because of his defense. I just don't see it. And left field's already a battle of its own, so that doesn't change anything with this news. I'm not sure it changes a lot for the Cardinals. Maybe it puts some pressure on Gorman, but honestly, I can't convince myself of that. So I don't think it has much roster construction outside of it just guarantees Pages some plate appearances at the plate.
I do think it has an effect on Gorman. He's the one that I would pinpoint because, man, if he's not good defensively and he's going through some struggles at the plate, it's very easy to yank him out of the lineup and say, hey, Urias, it's your turn. Or maybe this is another way they go, hey, so JC, we had you in a competition for left. We have other options that we like out there. Maybe it's Nathan Church. Maybe it ends up being Jose Fermin. Those guys are going to continue with the competition out there. It's your turn to go play third base. Let's see what this looks like. Because they clearly like Sajasi. I'm not sure they know exactly what he is now or in the future, but I think they like him as a player, and he brings something to the table. He's also a better defender and more athletic than what Nolan Gorman is, and he's a right-handed bat, which I think they could really use in their lineup. So I think Gorman's the one that would feel a little bit of that pressure. It's not right away, but after a few weeks, maybe a month, if you continue to see it going this way where the majority of Ivan Herrera's starts are coming at the designated hitter spot, I do think you could see Gorman start to lose a little bit of playing time because of what he's doing defensively if he keeps booting some of these balls the way that it looked, I mean, honestly, for most of the first portion of him starting at third base last year.
I can't convince myself of a scenario where they pull him out of the lineup. Because if that's the case, then we might as well just say in April he has no role for the Cardinals moving forward.
And that might be it.
And
he might be a DH.
And if that's the case, the other reason I say this, and I've brought this up before, I mean, he mentioned him as just, what if he is just a DH? I think if he's just a DH, the reason they're trying to play him in the field is if they think maybe this guy isn't a part of the core moving forward, we just want the bounce back and then we can trade him, you almost need him to be playing a position. Because nobody's probably going to value him if he's just a designated hitter. Now, if you truly believe he can play himself into your core, I think you can convince yourself if he can just be a DH, because we can just value that left-handed power ourselves. We've got the pieces around to figure it out defensively around the diamond. But I think if they are looking at him as like, hey, we need a bounce back here like they do from Nootbaar and we want to move on from him and cash in our chips, he almost has to play a position. And that's where I lean right now. And that's why I can't see them pulling him out of the lineup for an extended stretch and putting Urias there. I just don't see it. I can't see it at all this season.
All right, so that's the bad. Can we get to the good?
What's the good?
Have you seen what J.J. Weatherholt's doing?
Oh, that guy might be a stud.
Derek Gold told us earlier this week he thinks he's the best Cardinals hitter at camp. Now, I know some would say, yeah, well, everybody sucks on this team, so whatever. What does that mean? They do have a few good hitters, though. Alec Burleson is a professional hitter. Ivan Herrera, who we just mentioned, that is a professional hitter. These are guys that have been high-level, significant bats in the middle of a lineup for a decent offense. They've been high-level, consistent at bats. That's what I'll go with here. JJ Weatherholt has 7 walks so far in spring training. He's played in 7 games. He has 7 walks. Now, T-Bone, you know as well as anybody, I don't care about spring training stats. I do not care. But as we said with some of the velo stuff, the process can tell you something about a player. And what the process tells me about JJ Weatherholt is he's got a good eye. Because in spring training, a lot of other pitchers are trying to work on specific things. And as a hitter, if you're able to take advantage of that, you're going to get your opportunities to walk. But a lot of guys are just too aggressive and they're just trying to swing at everything. JJ Weatherholt, this was his case. This was the case for him down in the minors. It remains the case for him now in spring training. He's got a 580 OBP. It means he's getting on base more than half of the time. He's also hitting for a little bit of pop. I don't know what this is going to mean for him once we get into the regular season. I would not expect a 330 average and a 1200 OPS. I don't think that's particularly likely, but the early signs are there that JJ Weatherholt appears ready for the major leagues. And that's really all you can take from spring training. He looks the part of a major league hitter right now.
Yeah. And I think the best part right now, as you mentioned, was his eye. At least right now, he's got a major league eye. He's willing to take those pitches and he's looking to be selective. Now, we'll see on the power because the slug is being bumped by 1 home run in 12 at-bats. So it's naturally going to be bumped up a little bit higher. But the reason that I bring that up is now we're getting to that phase here in the next week or so where he's really going to start seeing the major league pitching. Because at times he's seen some guys that you've probably never heard of, and you would expect him to have the good batter's eye, and he probably goes up to the plate going, okay, this guy probably can't find the strike zone. If he continues to do this and has this good of a batter's eye, shows patience, shows the selectiveness that we've seen so far of, I'm going to wait for my pitch, then I'm going to try and make something happen with it. Yeah, that is something that I don't even think you saw that from Walker when he first got up here. Walker didn't have that, right? Burley didn't have that when he first came up. You think of Burley. Burley was I'm going to swing at everything and we'll see if I make contact on it.
They couldn't be more opposite in profiles.
Exactly. It reminds me more of like what Herrera is, because I think Herrera is a little bit more selective. Not as much, but he's definitely got a little bit of that where he's willing to do damage to his pitch.
That's what Donnie was.
Yeah, Donnie, another great example of a guy that would do that. Newpar, when he's right, does that, where he just takes everything and is looking for one pitch, and if he doesn't get it, he's happy to go down to first base. And if you can get a guy like that we're talking about, where it's Donnie or it's Newpar or it's Herrera, I don't know if that becomes a star. It just depends on how he develops with his power. Best case scenario for the beginning, though, is, okay, that's a 20% above league average hitter. You'll sign up for that any day of the week for a guy that's like 20 years old coming to the big leagues.
Yeah, it would be a hell of an addition to this roster. He's 24, by the way. He'll be 24 this year.
24. Sorry, I undersold his age there.
No, only reason I mentioned he's like a sneaky, quote unquote, old prospect just because he spent the time at the college level. He's not old, but, compared to
Walker, started as like a high school.
He's the same age as Jordan Walker.
There you go.
Jordan Walker has been at the big league level for multiple seasons. This is going to be JJ Weatherholt's first season at the big league level. Does that eye, that patience, what we've seen from him in spring training, does it open your mind again to the possibility of him as a leadoff hitter?
I was never opposed to him as a leadoff hitter,
to
be clear, especially while Newpar is out. I mean, you can pick and choose who you think belongs up there. I'm open-minded to it, because that good of a batter's eye would put him on base. So, yeah, I don't mind it. I still would caution people of, he's not going to have a 1200 OPS, as you said.
Agreed.
I still think he's going to have his struggles at the big leagues because he's still not seeing a ton of great pitching. He did see one today. He got a hit off Mitch Keller. That's a legitimate pitcher. But
went the other way.
And as we start to get into a month and a half in, is when the scouting report really amplifies on, okay, here's the hole in JJ Weatherholt's swing. We're all going after it, and then we'll see what he looks like. But I'm okay with hitting him leadoff on opening day at the end of March.
I still think the most likely scenario is you see Mason Wynn is your leadoff hitter and JJ Weatherholt hitting second. I think Wynn, Weatherholt, Herrera, Burleson is the most likely top 4 on opening day. That would be my guess, at least.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then I would put 5.
Good luck.
Gorman, I guess.
I think it's whoever's in left field. Because in this scenario, you're talking about Burleson as your cleanup hitter. So you're probably going with a righty there.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
You're trying to. I mean, you could go Jordan Walker if you want to. I don't think that's what they're going to do. I would probably say one of Fermin or Sajasi.
Ooh, nothing like Fermin hitting 5th in your batting.
I don't know who else you go with. I don't think it's Pages. I don't think it's Walker. Those are your other right-handed
originally
bats.
thinking Pozo, and then now Pozo might not be in the lineup. So
That's where it impacts you. Yeah. The middle of that order where you like kind of switch things over, that's where it starts to feel the pain of having Pages in there over Pozo. Because that's really the choice. Because no matter what, Herrera is going to be in your lineup. It's a matter of defensively where they're at and then what that allows for you offensively. If you have Herrera behind the plate, you can fit Pozo in there. He can bat fifth, and I'm good with that. If you have Herrera batting, or if you have Herrera in there as a DH, now I've got Pozo, and he's batting eighth.
Let's just...
Your 7-8-9 is probably like Walker, Pages.
Oh, your 7-8-9 is awful, but your 5-6-7-8-9 is bad still, either way. Even with Pozo, like... Pozo was solid last year. I don't remember what he ended up being.
He was good.
He was below league average, if I'm not mistaken.
No. Pozo last year was good.
The reason I say that...
Pozo was a 24% below league average hitter last
he had like two big moments. That's what everybody remembered. He was not that good offensively.
No, he was better than that. I don't care what the numbers say. He was better than
Chicago in the home run, which was an awesome moment when he had the kids hand painted on the bat.
I've never been more surprised by numbers.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I remember him being below league average last year. And the reason I brought that up is I agree with you. Ideally, I would love him hitting fifth over Sajacy or Fermin or whoever the hell wins that left field spot, Velasquez, who's battling for it as well. It's just a matter of like, how do you want your paint when you get to the 5 spot? Do you want like wax on your chest is getting ripped off? That's Fermin batting fifth. Stubbing your toe or stepping on Legos, it's like Pozo batting fifth. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is going to be a huge hole in this Cardinals lineup. So 1 through 4 will be fun. And then you get past that, and it's going to be just a bunch of ouch.
If you had to rank from last year, OPS plus, just like based upon that, 100 is league average. Anything above that is that percentage above. Anything below is that percentage below league average. Fermin, Pozo, Sajacy, how do you think they ranked last year at the major league level in OPS plus?
Fermin, Pozo, Sajacy. I think Fermin was 1. Let's see, Pozo I've gotten from me. So he was 78. I think Pozo was 2, Sajacy was 3.
Fermin 1, 25% above league average, by the way.
He's really good in his small sample size.
I think I flipped him with Pozo in my mind. Sajacy 2.
Oh, okay. He was better?
Slightly. And Pozo 3, 82. He was 18% below league average. He had a 641 OPS. Pozo was at a 637. They just went about it in different ways. So JC had no power, but he got on base at a higher clip and hit for a decent amount more average. Pozo, terrible average, terrible OBP, and a slightly better slug.
But clutch. And that's what BK remembers.
That's right. That's right. As you can probably imagine, not a ton going on at Cardinals spring training right now. We're kind of in the middle portion of spring training where you have defined spots on the roster that are up for grabs, but nobody's grabbing them today. It's going to be another few weeks of competition. So it's the dry spell in the middle of spring training. Still stuff worth monitoring, but not a ton of news on a day-to-day basis. We will continue to follow along with anything that takes place, though. That way, you don't have to. So stay tuned here on the Redbird Report. We will be back with a new episode very soon. He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Zane, who's always helping us out with the video side of things here on the Redbird Report. I'm Brandon Kiley. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.
Find every episode of the Redbird Report with Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson on YouTube or at 101ESPN.com.